Hello, podcast listeners. We know podcasts are a great way to catch up on a program that you may have missed on KSJE, and it's provided as a free service of this radio station. But KSJE is now listener-supported, and so while you enjoy this podcast, we hope that you'll also take some time to join KSJE. Become a member today. It's quite easy to do. Just go to our website at ksje.com/support and pick the level of support that best matches your budget. Thanks again for listening. Here's your podcast.
Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Gladden. I am an author, a journalist, and an editor. And on this week's episode, I have Ashley Biggers, and she is going to be talking about her newest book, 100 Things to Do in Albuquerque Before You Die. And then I also had the chance to read one of your previous books about some of the more interesting, unusual places in Albuquerque that people may enjoy visiting. Ashley, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. As DelSheree mentioned, I'm Ashley Biggers. I am a native Albuquerquean, and I am a writer, a journalist, and editor. I have contributed as a freelance writer to publications like Travel and Leisure, Condé Nast Traveler, Afar, and Lonely Planet. And I'm so delighted to be the author of Secret Albuquerque, A Guide to the Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure, and 100 Things to Do in Albuquerque Before You Die, which is actually in its third edition.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun reading these. I've lived in New Mexico most of my life and been to Albuquerque who knows how many times. But there was still a lot in these two books that I was like, I have never been there or never heard of that before. So this works really great for people new to the area and people who've been here a long time who just maybe haven't explored it as much as they could.
It really does. I think a lot of people who stop by and chat with me about the book when I'm doing signing are longtime Albuquerqueans, whether they've lived here or visited here many times, and they feel like they know the city, and then they start flipping through the book and discover that there are lots of things that they have yet to experience. So Albuquerque is definitely a place that has many layers, and you can continue discovering it. And I think, this Secret Albuquerque came out right before the pandemic started, and then 100 Things to Do in Albuquerque Before You Die, the latest edition, came out at the end of last year. And I think one thing that we learned during the pandemic was our hometowns are very interesting, and there's lots to explore here. We were kind of staying closer to home there for a while, and so I think many people are more interested than ever in getting out and exploring the places that we feel are familiar, but seeing them in a new light. And I think both of these titles help people do that, at least in the Duke City.
Absolutely. And true of the books. And then I think also of what you said of I think that's one of the interesting things that have come out of slowly getting out of the pandemic. I don't know if we can ever say like when it really ended or when it will end. It's
exactly. I'm still murky
ongoing.
On that.
Yeah. We just now, like our local hospital just recently dropped masks as a mandatory thing. And it kind of made me step back because I got that press release at work and I was like, oh, yeah, we're still dealing with that, huh?
Yeah.
And it's been interesting to see those effects, and really, like, I love traveling. I love going interesting places with my kids and having adventures. But we have lately, stuck a little bit more to home, and it's like, okay, what's around here that we haven't done in a while or have never been to? And even just, I'm up here in Farmington, looking around for some of those opportunities, even in a small town, I'm like, oh, yeah, actually, there's quite a few things here that I'm aware of but have never done. And so being able to read through these and see some of those places in Albuquerque as well, I was really kind of blown away by how many interesting things and fun places that I'd never even heard of, despite having spent quite a bit of time in Albuquerque.
Well, and I think it's one of those things where, we're busy people with kids and jobs and obligations, and we get going on our familiar paths, and then we kind of stay on that. And you think, especially if you live in a place, whether it's Albuquerque or anywhere else, if something's there and you haven't experienced it, it's like, oh, I'll do that next weekend. But then, you keep doing that for years and years and never never go to that place. So sometimes a book like these, or even if it's a homemade list that you write on a post-it and stick on your refrigerator of things near you, it can help you kind of define where you want to go and explore and help you get out of that well-worn path of your life.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. Now, some of the ones, I went through 101 Things to Do in Albuquerque Before You Die first. I was actually planning to be in Albuquerque the weekend after I started reading this. I was like, we're going to find some places to eat and explore while we were up there for an event with my daughter. And the food, I love food. I love trying new food. And so that was one of the first things that I was like, ooh, I hope she got to go eat at all these places and test them out while she was writing this.
Yes, that is certainly part of the gig. I have done all 100 things, and I'm the only person I've ever encountered who has. So if any of the listeners have done all 100 things, I would love to hear about it, and I can take you out for a green chili cheeseburger or a margarita to toast. But yes, sampling all the restaurants is an important gig. And, in New Mexico, we love our green chili cheeseburgers. And so that's an important pick for Albuquerque. And so I rope my husband into being a green chili cheeseburger tester along with me. And so he's very begrudgingly, of course, signs up for that gig and helps me out.
Well, I'm glad he gets to benefit from this project as well.
Yes, exactly.
Now, one of the things that caught my attention, I recently was visiting with our local NMSU extension office, and we had an interesting conversation about agritourism and something that they are trying to help develop in this area. And there were several places in the food section and then in some of the experience section that you brought up that really made me think more about that. And one of those was the Indian Pueblo Kitchen. And it was a really interesting place that you wrote about because it was not just a place to eat. It really was a cultural experience from the way you wrote about it. And so I wanted to ask you about some of those more unique places that you were able to visit that are almost, it seems like, kind of hard to classify on where you could put them in the book.
Well, Indian Public Kitchen is a great spot to go. I think it's often overlooked when people are going to the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center because they're more focused on the exhibits or perhaps some of the dances that are being presented there, or even the wonderful gift shop. But the Indian Pueblo Kitchen is really kind of helping define what is indigenous cuisine today. And they use a lot of ingredients that were contact ingredients, like, of course, the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, and then other things that might be a little more obscure, like sumac, in their menu in terms of, resurrecting and continuing ingredients that people may not be familiar with or that may be more rare. And then they also do, a fair bit of modern day fusion cuisine. So they might do chicken and waffles, but your fried chicken is served on a blue corn waffle. And so kind of incorporating those heritage ingredients into more hip or fun food items today. So that's a really great spot to go. One other of my sort of off the beaten path food experiences in Albuquerque is Bike and Coffee, which is a food stand that they operate at Old Town Farm. So over the years, the owners of Old Town Farm decided that they wanted to stop attending farmers market with all of their produce, and so they started inviting folks to come to the farm for breakfasts using the food is made with many of their ingredients grown right there. And because it's right off the Paseo del Bosque Trail, they encourage people to bike to the farm for their breakfast. So you can go there Thursday through Sunday mornings and have wonderful sort of farm to table food and sit in the very farm fields where your breakfast is grown. And if you arrive there under pedal power, you're also getting a pretty good workout while you're at it.
Absolutely. That was another one that I was like, this sounds like a lot of fun. And something that I think even people who are just visiting for the weekend, there are places where you can rent bikes and still be able to do that under pedal power and visit some of those areas, which I thought I like doing those kind of experiences where it's not something that maybe you're, oh, I'm going to go there specifically to do this thing. but it gets incorporated into an overall trip. And that sounded like a really fun one to do.
Absolutely. I think a lot of places when we travel, we see the highlights, the marquee attractions of a place and don't really get to know the city. And so this type of book helps people get to more local favorites like bike and coffee. And I will mention that the 100 Things book is part of a national series, and so there are companion titles for cities all across the U.S., whether it's Minneapolis or LA or Miami. So if people are traveling other places or have friends and family that live across the country, there might be companion titles for those locations as well. And so it's worth exploring and finding, books for wherever you live or are interested in traveling as well.
That's really neat. Yeah, because that's something I think having that local perspective on a place really makes a difference in what you find. And I think that's kind of what a lot of like hometown travel blogs came from, was that idea of like, hey, we have other cool stuff here and we want to share that with you. But sometimes those are hard to find when you're trying to research a place. So that's neat that I didn't realize that this was a series that maybe you can find for whatever place you're visiting and get a little bit more of a local take on that.
Absolutely. And one thing I hear often about Albuquerque from travelers at least is like, oh, I drove through there one time. I didn't see much, worth exploring from the freeway. And it's like, oh, yes, all the best things you can see in a city are definitely visible from the main thoroughfares. So, it's worth getting off the freeway and exploring a little deeper wherever you go.
Yeah, and that was another aspect of really both of these, was some of the outdoor areas that I know, some of the main ones, the Bosque Redondo, and ones that I'm like, oh yeah, I've been there, I know about those. But there were quite a few that I did not know that was there. And I'll probably pronounce this wrong, so I apologize. The Kashakatue, you might be able to correct that. The volcanic area. I was reading about that and I was like, wow, yeah, I didn't know that was so close and that it was even there and available for people to go explore.
Yes, so that is Kashakatue Tent Rocks National Monument is kind of halfway between Albuquerque and Santa Fe. So I'm stretching the boundaries of Albuquerque a little bit, but I hope people forgive me for that. But it has these very rare formations that were formed by volcanic explosions and then over the many years, erosion kind of shaping these what look like tent rocks. And the other really famous place in the world where you would see these are in Cappadocia, Turkey. So they're pretty rare and kind of fun that we have them within Albuquerque's backyard. And they also have some slot canyons that you can hike through, and it's a really stark and beautiful desert hiking experience. I will say that at this moment, I believe they are still closed because they share lands with Cochiti Pueblo. And of course, our Pueblo communities have been very cautious about reopening, rightfully so. So I would just check out to make sure that it is open before you road trip out there.
And I liked that you included in so much of these little details like that of, hey, this place really needs reservations, or, check on certain things like weather and different times of year. It's really handy because I've noticed just in trying to plan things, a lot of times, and especially since the pandemic, a lot of websites are not updated. And sometimes you're like ready to go do something and you're like, oh, this is not accurate. So yes, I appreciate those little notes.
Thank you. I tried to incorporate quite a few tips for the traveler, about the best way to experience a place or when discount tickets might be available. And I actually got a little flack from my publisher for including so many tips, but I was an advocate and said these are helpful. And so I'm glad to hear that they added to your reading experience.
Absolutely. And it sounds like kind of a segue, but your publisher, that's an interesting relationship. And I like to ask writers about their publishing experience because it tends to be very all over the place on how much people do or do not enjoy the experience of publishing. And I haven't had the chance to talk to many travel writers yet. So what was that like for you working on these books, especially it being a very local focus for the book? What was that experience like of saying, no, these are the interesting things, these are the important ones to include? How did that process of going back and forth on some of those work with that?
Yeah, so the both of the Secret Albuquerque and 100 Things to Do in Albuquerque book are published by Reedy Press, which is a press out of St. Louis, Missouri, and they really specialize in these types of regional titles. So thus the companion books for all over the country. But I would say in terms of editorial control, they really left it up to me in order to choose the best destinations to include in the book and how I wanted to cover them. So they didn't really have any input in terms of those choices, but they provided, a lot of copy editing and production help. And they've also provided a lot of help in marketing the book, because one thing that surprised me as a first-time author when I first published 100 Things to Do in 2015 was that writing the book is only about half of the work, which to people who, are struggling to complete a manuscript is probably really bad news. And it was to me, because I felt like I had just slaved away on this book and put it out in the world, and I thought, I'm done. But that's really, almost like a starting line in itself. So they have been very supportive in terms of helping arrange book signing events and coordinating, interviews with people like you and other media outlets, which is a large component of kind of having a book out and living in the world.
Yeah, that is a shocking and often disappointing realization for a lot of new writers. It's
well,
like, oh, wait,
especially when you're, as a writer, we tend many of us to be introverts and to want to, sit at our computers and slave away over our words and then not have to go and talk about it. And so the fact that I had to not only write it, but also go talk about it was quite the shock to me as a first-time published writer.
Well, and that's great that you've had so much support from the publisher, because that's unfortunately a lot of smaller presses often don't have the budget for that or the manpower, and a lot of that does end up being put on the writer to fill in a lot of those gaps. So that's really nice to hear that you've had a lot of support there.
Yes, I have heard that as well, that, a lot of presses, particularly smaller ones, kind of leave it up to the writers to handle all of that. And I've been fortunate to have support and maybe a little enthusiastic cheerleading as well to complete those parts of the book writing and publishing and marketing processes.
That's great. And it sounds like from one of the notes in the book that when it came to learning about some of these places and getting ideas, maybe that you had some community support as well. For some of them, you had little snippets of quotes that where you were able to talk to some of the people directly involved with some of the events or venues that you're writing about. And tell me a little bit more about that with reaching out to people, doing some of those interviews. You have a journalism background, so that probably was not as, hopefully, as intimidating to you as it can be to some people, especially for introverted writers to have to go out and talk to people about stuff.
Yes, well, I definitely had an advantage in putting these titles together, because for my day job as a journalist, it's my job to go out and write about places and things that are happening and restaurants and things to do in Albuquerque and beyond. And so, one of the most common questions I get is, how did you find all the places that you included in your books? And to me, that was actually one of the easier parts, because I have done so much of that for my day job in reporting articles. And so compiling those lists was pretty easy, because that's what I do all the time. And as you say, I have a journalism background, and so it's my job to go and ask people questions. So that wasn't a hurdle at all. And in many cases, I had written articles about these destinations in the past and had contacts and was able to reach out and say, I'm now putting this book together and would like to include your attraction and visit with them a little bit more about the place with that specific purpose in mind and gather those comments from them. So I essentially just treated each of the destinations as a discrete journalism article that I was reporting.
I like that approach. That's a good way to look at it, because I think that can be overwhelming for newer writers. My day job, also journalism, I'm actually involved in getting a new newspaper started up here in Farmington. And so part of what I've been doing is working with community members and kind of training them in that style of journalism and walking them through how to contact people, how to do an interview, and some of those basic skills that you get used to doing as a journalism, but for someone who's never had to do that before is like, I don't know, that seems scary.
Well, I applaud you for your efforts in getting a new newspaper started in Farmington. The lack of local news is it's scary for our communities, for our democracy. So that is wonderful and such an important effort. And I really feel for people who are doing that for the first time. It does take some bravery when you're calling up someone who you've never spoken to before and you're kind of asking them for a favor because you're asking them to talk with you. So that can be tricky, but I have to hand it to my mom a little bit in that book, because when I was growing up, she would always make me do silly things like call and order the pizza when we were, having that for our dinner that night and things like that. So she made me talk to people on the phone and do those cold calls. So I just joke that was my early journalism training.
That's pretty awesome, because that is something with my own kids. It's kind of funny because, me growing up, we didn't have cell phones, there was no texting. There's, even when I was like early in high school, email was still kind of, not everybody participated or knew what the heck you were talking about. And so, you had to use the phone. You had to call people if you needed information. You had to go there in person. And it was funny, like the first time that I had one of my kids call somebody about something, and I think it was something like my daughter was trying to talk us into getting a dog at one point, and was like, okay, you need to call and ask them questions about this dog then. And her face was just like, you want me to do what?
Yes. Well, I wonder if kids growing up, my kiddo's not quite old enough to manage this yet, but I wonder if the kids even know that phones work that way, because we always just text and and email or DM on various social media. So they're like, wait, you can actually talk to people on this device as well? What?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience to watch her go through that process and have to, speak to to an adult and ask her
Right.
questions. And it was funny because one time we were in Albuquerque, actually, at the National History Museum there, and they had an exhibit of like old spy gear. And one of the things on the table was an old rotary phone. And my kids were looking at it a little perplexed, and they're just like, what do you do with this? And so I explain, how you use a rotary phone and how you have to stick your finger in there and each number. And I explain this to them, and my daughter looks at me and she goes, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I'm like, well, that was...
She's like, you're making this up, Mom.
Yeah, she's just like, she couldn't even believe it. And I'm like, no, that's how they worked.
Yes.
And so
Well,
it's funny. Yeah.
if you guys are looking for another sort of off the beat destination in Albuquerque, you might try out the Telephone Museum of New Mexico, which is devoted to all things telephone. And then not only do they have rotary phones and phones with many other styles, but they have, the old operator switchboards where, an operator had to sit and connect the different lines. And so that will really blow their minds.
Yeah, that is something that really fascinates me. And like that some of the managers in those offices would wear roller skates so they could get back and forth to the different switchboards more quickly.
Yes.
That was just something really fun about these books, was that you had just the most interesting little tidbits of information within each one, and there were quite a few. I set the book down and now I can't find it again. But with Vivian Vance, you had the little bit there. Oh, there it is. That Vivian Vance, one of the stars from I Love Lucy, she played Ethel, has a history in Albuquerque. And I love I Love Lucy. I grew up watching a lot of that, and I had no idea that she had any connection to Albuquerque whatsoever. And so that was just a really fun bit of history to come across in this book as well.
Yeah, she had sort of some high school but early formative years in Albuquerque, and her family actually ran Vance Market downstairs in a building at Broadway Boulevard and Cole Avenue. And then she also kind of got her acting start here in Albuquerque. So she was in, I believe, at least one, but it might be more than one now that I think of it, shows at Albuquerque Little Theater. So she kind of got her start here in Albuquerque before relocating to LA, and of course getting her much more famous roles as Lucille Ball's sidekick.
I would just really encourage people to check these out and see what they have probably missed in their own area. As someone who's lived in New Mexico for a really long time, I thoroughly enjoyed learning more about my own home state. And definitely for people traveling through, I think these are both great guides to add to your visit. However long you're going to be here, there's things you can do in an hour, or you can pack your whole weekend or however long your trip is with a lot of really fun and interesting things.
Well, I certainly enjoyed researching them. It gave me an opportunity to get to know my hometown even better, and also to, explore things that I had driven by or seen all my life or wondered about, and kind of get to pull back that curtain and see, why that thing was there, or what that was all about. And I certainly included some key attractions in the 100 Things to Do in Albuquerque book. It also has a few local favorites. And then for Secret Albuquerque, the subtitle is A Guide to the Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure. And I definitely discovered those items, and Albuquerque certainly specializes in the weird, wonderful, and obscure. So I had lots of fodder for that book as well.
Yes, there's a lot of unique aspects to the area, and that was a lot of fun to see all those put together and highlighted. Are you working on any projects right now?
I am not working on any book projects for myself. I'll also mention that I do edit a series of guidebooks for University of New Mexico Press called the Southwest Adventure Series. So books in that series cover outdoor and soft adventure, as we would call it. So there are some food books in there as well, and they cover the Four Corners states. So we have some titles coming up in that series about food in Colorado, and there are Backroads and Byways books for Arizona, and family travel in New Mexico titles in that series. So working on cultivating all of those titles, but I don't have anything on my desk in the book regard quite at this time.
Well, we all need that break to focus on some other stuff as well, so I totally get that. But I just wanted to remind readers or listeners, I always say readers. But yeah, I just wanted...
hazard of our other work and our day jobs.
Yes, it's hard to get my mind switched over sometimes. But yeah, so I wanted to remind listeners that the books are 100 Things to Do in Albuquerque Before You Die, and Secret Albuquerque, A Guide to the Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure. And those are by Ashley Biggers. And where can people find you to get your books and just keep an eye on what you're up to?
Yeah, the books are available in our local bookstores in Albuquerque, like Bookworks and Page One. You can also find them at Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. And if all else fails, you can find them at ashleymbbiggers.com. And if you want to follow Things to Do in Albuquerque on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, I'm at Albuquerque Guide.
All right. Well, everybody check those out if you're going to be in the Albuquerque area, or if you live there and want to get out and explore some more. Thank you so much, Ashley, for taking the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Did you enjoy that podcast? We hope that you did. And if you did, share it with your friends. And if you really want to keep podcasts like this coming, please support KSJE. You can do it easily online at ksje.com.